FDR took office. But if you realized that you were going to be paying back in dollars that had more purchasing power because prices were falling, what you would say as a consumer or a business is, wow, the cost of borrowing is really high, even though the nominal interest rate is zero. So what happened when Roosevelt did the monetary expansion, where he actually committed to getting prices back to where they were before the Great Depression, what he did was change those expectations. So people stopped expecting deflation and started expecting a little inflation. And that greatly reduced the cost of borrowing and the real cost of borrowing. And so people rightly said, well, now's a great time to buy a car. Or businesses said this is a great time to build a new factory. Or one of my favorite, farmers went out in mass numbers and bought trucks, right? That was kind of how they responded to the lower real cost of borrowing. So that's a mechanism by which monetary expansion and some expectations of mild inflation instead of deflation can actually get the economy spending again, growing again. Now, when you come to today, I mean, I think what you described, the Fed has invested 25 years in convincing us that they're not going to let inflation get out of control, and that has certainly been a good thing. So I think the real issue for today is, how do you preserve that credibility, but maybe have a period where we have a little bit more inflation than we're used to. That's why a whole bunch of economists are very interested in what's called the price level target. We're used to saying the Fed should... Well, let me just take a second. I don't think you'll lose all your ratings. But the idea is basically to say, on average, we want prices to go up by 2% a year or less than 2% a year. But if you have a period when they've gone up by a lot less than that, you can have another period where they grow up by a little bit more than that. And, but you don't lose your credibility. Everyone understands when you get back to sort of where you were, then you're still going to be having inflation very well contained. So I think that would be a sensible way to do something bold today that could have some very good impact.
And let's talk, too, about what the President and Congress could do. So you were in the White House for a few years, and I know you've heard that the President is thinking of bringing out a big new jobs plan in September. So when you look at the current situation, what are the things we could do that seem to you to be the big no-brainers, the clear policies we could implement to help people get back to work now?
So I think the first thing I'd say is, and I'd certainly be encouraging the President when I say think bold, I'd actually first think about, sort of what are the broad parameters of any package you want to come out with. I think the really important thing, it needs to be, a fair amount more. I mean, we're not supposed to say fiscal stimulus anymore, but we actually need fiscal help for the economy in the near term. And the way you make that palatable to financial markets and, just for our own good long-term health is you pair that with more significant deficit reduction over time. And so I want to be bolder on both these dimensions. So some really good, strong things for the economy to help get people back to work today, and a lot more deficit reduction than was just passed in the fight over the debt ceiling. And so the kind of things you put in that first piece, of course infrastructure should be there. I mean, that, again, that's a no-brainer. We know our roads and our bridges and our airports. There's just so much more we could be doing. If you spent money on that, you not only put people back to work now, you're left with something. You're left with a more productive economy, and that's, good for our long-run economic growth. So that's a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. I think a serious kind of jobs tax credit, something that encourages firms to do what we want to do, which is hire people. So I wouldn't just give them a tax cut because they're already sitting on so much cash, but give them a tax cut or a wage subsidy or something if they actually hire people, if they actually increase their payroll.
Right.
And make it generous. Don't make it some little stingy thing. Make it a big, generous subsidy if you hire people. And that, I think, could get them to do what we want them to do. And certainly when I was in the White House and we worked the numbers on this, that's something that can have a really big bang for the buck. And so I'd be wildly in favor of that.
Great. Well, Christina, we're going to have to leave it there. I'm being told we need to run to commercial, but we will continue this conversation another day. So
okay.
Thank you so much for joining us. And coming up, a new study shows an
fucking
unexpected
douchebag
truth about the Tea Party.